All right, Vince, we've come to that time where I ask you,
Uh-oh.
are you ready for rapid fire?
Oh, let's go. I'm ready. Ready.
All right.
Ready.
So, fill in the blank. Steve Angeli signing with Syracuse is blank.
Is stomach filling is what it is. I'm going to keep coming back to it. No, I think it's honestly, from a football standpoint, it's an interesting choice because the offense that Syracuse runs, I don't know that really fits who Steve Angeli is, right? There are other teams I think that fit his skill set better. I know there's some personal connections there, and I get that, and that's recruiting, right? That's part of it. I totally understand that, and maybe they're going to adjust their offense and all of those different things. But as it stands, the offense that they ran last year, I don't think fits his skill set that well, to be perfectly honest. So it's an interesting choice. I get it. I understand it. But I don't know how successful it's going to be.
Yeah, my first thought when I saw this was exactly the same as yours. We are getting free food now from Jesse because he was, not wise enough to make the bet with us. That the whole bet, if you missed it,
Man.
was Jesse was digging his heels in that Steve Angeli was not going to go to a Power Four team. So here he is. He makes one visit, and just a little bit more than a week later, he's playing for Syracuse. So we're very happy. Jesse owes both Vince and I dinner. So we're very excited about that. From a football standpoint, I mean, he's just leaving one quarterback competition and jumping into another one. He's going to have to go compete for a job at Syracuse. There are no guarantees that he's going to end up the starting quarterback. Now, I guess you could say that about any place that you go, but Syracuse has got the LSU transfer, and that's who he's going to be competing with. So I think it's an interesting choice. But again, obviously the relationship that he had with the former high school coach must have gone a long way in this whole thing. And that's what Brian wants to know. Well, Angeli beat out Collins, the 4-star LSU transfer. That is the golden question. They are now going to battle in fall training camp for that job. I don't think Angeli's just going to be handed the job by any means.
Do you want to do the early look at the Syracuse schedule? Because it is not a cakewalk, Sean Stiers.
Let's do it.
There are 6 losses on there potentially, but let's roll through it. Let's see what we can do here. So they open up on the road the day before Notre Dame kicks off their schedule on August 30th down at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So neutral site against the Tennessee Volunteers. That's an L. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to find the schedule so I can actually see it as well. So sorry.
No, I was trying to go over every possible, detail about that game because I knew you were looking. But opening up against
Tennessee, not a great place to start. Not a great place to start.
No. Now, then they got 2 kind of layup games. They got UConn and Colgate.
UConn's getting better, though.
I
wouldn't just write that off by any means.
I will put it in the win column for now. So that makes them 2-1 coming out of week 3. Then they go on the road to Clemson. And if Cade Klubnik is everything that these Heisman voters or Heisman odds prognosticators think he's going to be, I think that's a loss. So now they're 2-2. What say you at this point?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I didn't realize we were predicting the whole thing, but okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what we were doing. All right, we can go faster. So home against Duke.
Yep. I'll say I'll give them credit for a win against Duke.
Cool. So they're 3-2. SMU at SMU.
A playoff team from a year ago on the road. I'm going to take the Mustangs.
I am as well. So they are now 500 again. Pitt at home.
Kind of a toss-up game. Remember Pitt started off like what, 8-0, 9-0 last year before they just fell completely off the wagon at the end. But they're going to have a first time. I guess the guy that they had, I think he was a freshman this past season, and he got hurt. Kind of another toss-up. I'll give it to the home team. I'll say they'll beat Pittsburgh.
Okay, 1 game over. Georgia Tech
at Georgia Tech.
Yep.
I'll say loss.
Okay, so back to 500. North Carolina at home. The Fighting
Again,
Bill
another
Belichick's.
toss-up. Yeah, what's the Belichick Tar
Yeah,
Heels
I know.
gonna look
Seriously.
like?
And that's on Halloween.
Mm.
It's a
I
Friday
don't know.
night.
I have no idea how to pick
I
that
know.
one.
I agree with you. And then at Miami, at the Rock.
I'll say loss.
So let's say we'll give them the win in North Carolina. We'll give them a loss in Miami. I think we're back to 500. Then you got Notre Dame at Notre Dame.
Loss.
I think we can all agree on that. And then Boston College at home.
I'm going to say loss in that one as well.
That means they're 2 games under 500, according to you.
Okay.
5-7.
Are you in that ballpark?
Yeah, I said 6-6 maybe, but that's a tough schedule. That's a tough schedule. So they better figure it out real quick.
DK says, why would Syracuse bring Angeli in if Collins was that great? I'm not saying Collins is that great, but obviously you bring him in to have depth in the quarterback room. That's what Notre Dame had, was great depth in the quarterback room, and that's what Syracuse lacks. I mean, like you lose Cal McCord, and now you've got basically, Collins had minimal snaps as well in his time at LSU. You bring him in to compete for the job, basically. I'm not saying Angeli is definitely losing to Collins. I'm just saying he's in a quarterback battle, which is what he was in when he was here at Notre Dame. So he's still in a quarterback battle by going to Syracuse. I'm not saying he's going to win. I'm not saying he's going to lose. I'm just saying he's in a quarterback battle, and it's not a given that he's going to be the starter.
And I'm not going to claim that I know all about Syracuse's roster. Okay. How much can Steve elevate that roster? That I think that remains to be seen. He's a good leader. He's a great locker room guy. He has all of those intangibles, which I think is awesome. How much can he elevate that entire team? I don't know anything about Syracuse's defense, right? Is it going to be a shootout in every game? I don't know the answer to that. Do they have a really good defense where they have to average 21 points and they're going to win a bunch of games? I don't know. But from what I know about the teams that they're going to play, that's a tough schedule. That's all I'm saying. That is not a cakewalk schedule.
Not easy by any means.
Yeah.
So Marcus Freeman was asked at his press conference yesterday about the ceiling for his team in 2025, and here's his answer.
I think I've matured a little bit since last year, where I made the comments of this is the most talented team I've been a part. This is again, this is I really like this team that we put together and that we have, and I think it has a lot of potential. We have to expedite that elevation to reaching our full potential, but outcomes are driven from a lot of different things. The outcomes of a game, right? And the ability to say you won or lost a game. There's so many things that determine that. But when you talk about this team being a really good football team, we definitely have the ability to do that. We just got to continue to develop. And we'll see what the outcomes are, right? Like, if you would ask me after week 2 last year, what's the outlook of this season? I'm just trying to get ready for week 3, but we'll let the outcomes kind of happen when we get to the season. But I do believe we have a high ceiling, and we just got to continue to elevate to reaching that level that we aspire to reach.
So no bold proclamations, didn't want to make any exclamations there, Vince. What do you think is the ceiling for this team, and or any, thoughts on what you just heard from Marcus Freeman there?
Well, the ceiling is the best, right? That's the best that they could do. The ceiling's the national championship. It has to be. I think, and that's not saying they're going to win the national championship. That's saying that's what the ceiling is, right?
Yeah, I think this team has a legit chance to, at a minimum, be in the college football playoff.
That's
and just like last year, advance in the playoff and win the national championship. I think that's absolutely the ceiling.
And I feel like, with the way things are trending from a roster standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, I think every year you should go into the season with the floor being the playoff and the ceiling being a national championship. Like that's who Notre Dame aspires to be.
So is that what you're saying the floor is then? Just being in the playoff?
Yeah, that's the floor. Yeah, absolutely. I think
to me it's like 10-2 and you're on the bubble.
You're in the conversation.
Yeah.
To go at the end of the season.
Yeah.
That's fair. Because you're not going to make the playoff every year. Like that that's an unrealistic goal. You're just not, you can think that, but you're just not. So, okay, I could see that. So we'll drop the floor just a skosh. But I think they should absolutely be in the discussion every year.
Joe says he thinks Marcus Freeman thinks they can do it. I think you're right, but he just doesn't want to come out and say it right now at the end of spring practice.
That's absolutely fair too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, they just played in the national championship game, and there's every argument that the roster is even better
Correct.
this year in 2025 than it was in 2024.
And that's the thing when you're talking about a ceiling. Like if that team last year can go to the national championship game, then the ceiling for this team should be the national championship game, if not winning that game. You know what I mean? Like that's just realistic. It's not like we're sitting here and we're USC talking about a terrible, I saw what's his name, the podcaster talking about USC. I can't remember with the guy that wears the tight t-shirts.
The blonde guy, JD.
I don't think it's JD. It's not Clatt.
Oh, the bald guy. The bald
guy who always wears the tight shirts and stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about. He picked Notre Dame to lose every game last year, basically.
Hey,
that guy.
Pate.
Yeah, Josh Pate. Thank you. He did I listened to him talk about USC because apparently he went there and he was in the building and whatever. And he's like, this team, is not talking like a team that went 5-7 last year or whatever it was that they went. This team is talking like national champions and blah, 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 blah. And they have a national championship attitude. Like, where's the foundation for that attitude? You know what I mean? Like, he's like, Lincoln Riley's been there to the playoff, and Chad Bowden was just in the national championship. So that's the attitude and blah, blah, blah. But like, that's the attitude at Notre Dame too, because they were actually in that game last year. You know what? That's the difference.
Right.
That's the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Bowden is taking, this unearned swagger with
correct
to USC. And it's like, talk is cheap, baby. And that's why Marcus Freeman's not saying anything right now, because talk is cheap. None of that. Like, it's great that they have an attitude, but again, it's spring. Okay.
Correct.
So like, if you don't have a great attitude in spring, there'd be much worse problems, like how far does that go into the season when you're getting your brains beat in again because your offensive line and your defensive line are not competitive, not compatible to being in the Big Ten. We'll see. I would hope that they would have a great attitude. Notre Dame should, because like Vince said, they just played in the freaking national championship game.
They should be very confident in what they can do. Very confident,
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a good starting point, Tom, if USC can prove they can win a Big Ten road game.
Right.
Just one.
That's great, Tom. That's well played, sir. Well played.
Great starting point.
Yeah.
So Freeman also said yesterday that Gerby Lambert will work this summer to try to get back to full activities after having shoulder labrum surgery this spring. Father David asked on the Champions Lounge yesterday if Lambert will have enough time in the fall to press for an opening day starting tackle position, or if that's too much to come back from in that short amount of time. So what do you think is realistic for Lambert, both in fall camp and this season, Vince?
I mean, I so want him to be competitive in this race that, I got to be careful with my, quote unquote prediction here. Right. So, because I want it so bad, that's my problem. I think, depending on when in the summer that he can get back, like the biggest issue is going to be, hitting the weight room and things like that. Cause, a shoulder injury, you're not able to.
That's exactly it.
So when is he
bench
able
press,
to come
by
back?
the way, is not good for your shoulders.
Correct.
I don't know if people knew that, but that's actually
right.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But you also need to bench a lot to be strong and,
and he needs
contact.
And he needs to have a strong upper body. I mean, that was basically what he was quote unquote lacking, besides understanding everything and all of that. Like, he just needs to bulk up a little bit, right? So that part worries me a little bit. So it really all depends on when he comes back. I mean, if he's just stepping foot on the practice field the first day of fall camp without any kind of off-season conditioning and stuff like that, then that's going to be really tough. If he's got a month before that, then I give him a shot for competing. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think so. I just, like you, I think it's going to be rough for him to be able to compete for a spot during camp because of the strength. I can't see him
Yeah.
getting close to, having, even 80, maybe 80% strength during fall training camp. Like that could still be pushing it,
Yeah.
70%, 80%, whatever. But as the season goes on, if he gets back to full strength, I think he should be one of the top 7 linemen
Right.
on the team. And, like Andrew was talking about Styles Prescott, and he would be in that conversation as well. But, I would have Sullivan Absher in there, like it feels like Absher is probably,
I just don't know what position they're going to play him at.
well, I was going to say, like,
Yeah.
for the interior positions, it feels like he could be the number 2 at any of the interior positions. And then for the tackles, obviously you've got Wagner, Knapp, and then, again, is Lambert healthy? And then you've got Prescott in that conversation. And we still don't know for sure what exactly they're going to do with Charles Jagasaw.
Yeah.
Has Absher maybe ascended enough to make them feel confident about him at a tackle and move Jagasaw, or at a guard and move Jagasaw back out to tackle? And look, I know some people get touchy when we start talking about all this. These are all legitimate questions. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, and no one's bagging on Anthony Knapp. I'll just say that
Not at all.
front, the last time we talked about Anthony Knapp, we had people, coming back at us. And
you could be in a lot worse position than having Anthony Knapp on your starting offensive line. I'll just say that. I mean, because, did he struggle last year? Sure. In my opinion, was he playing out of position? Sure. He's got a whole offseason to kind of get some things figured out. So, like, I'm willing to kind of give it a bit of a wait and see situation. Now, am I more of a Lambert fan at tackle? Yeah, I am. And it really stunk when he got injured. And so if he's ready to go by July 1st, I think I give him a shot at competing for one of those spots. The problem is Anthony Knapp already entrenched in that spot? Mm-hmm. So that's a different conversation, though, too, right? That's a conversation of, is there, I hate to use the word favoritism, but is there a lean for the offensive line coach towards Anthony Knapp? Whereas if they're even, Anthony Knapp's going to get the start because he has all that experience and all of those things. So I think it's also a situation where Lambert would need to be significantly better to get the spot. And it would have to be very obvious that he's the better option.
But again, I think the odds are very high that the first team offensive line that we see line up on day 1 of training camp doesn't look the same as the one that takes the field on August 31st.
That's fair.
The way things have gone in Rudolph's first 2 years.
That's absolutely fair.
NFL draft starts tonight. Which Notre Dame guy gets drafted first? Benjamin Morrison or Xavier Watts?
I still think it's going to be Morrison just because of the value the teams place on corner as opposed to safety. And, Xavier Watts is going to make some team very happy. He's just not going to get drafted as high as all of us think he should. And I think he may end up having a longer career than Benjamin Morrison, but I think Benjamin Morrison goes earlier in the draft just because of the position, just because I don't even want to say name recognition because everybody knows who Xavier Watts is. It's so hard for me because you've got Xavier Watts on paper, right? And we know that he doesn't test super well. He's not super tall. He's not super long. But you throw in the tape and you watch him play, and it's like, how can you not draft this kid in the first round? He is going to instantly make your defense better, And so it's really tough. But I just think too many GMs out there are just too, blindsided. They got the blinders on for what they see on paper. And that's why I think Ben Morrison goes first.
I'm going the other way. I think it is going to be
Watts. I love you. I love it. That's what I want to happen. It's going to
be Watts because that's what you see on film.
Yeah,
is Xavier Watts always around the football, and obviously, we know that Benjamin Morrison is just straight up talented, and if he hadn't gotten hurt, there's a really good chance he would have gone in the first round. But I think that hip injury, and you can couple that with the fact that he had a shoulder injury less than a year earlier, just a few months before the hip injury. I think that's going to be enough of a concern that I think there's a greater chance. I think I agree with what Josh was saying. I think Xavier Watts goes somewhere late in the second round, and then I think that Benjamin Morrison is like early to mid third round type guy. I think there'll be just enough hesitancy because of the injury that teams aren't going to want to invest that high a pick in Morrison. But if he stays healthy, they're gonna get an absolute. They're gonna get a steal with either one of them.
Either one,
round,
yes,
but
either one.
They're gonna get a bigger steal with Morrison if he can stay healthy.
I think the most fun thing to watch in this draft, because obviously I think we can all agree, barring something unforeseen happening, we're not going to see a Notre Dame player called tonight.
Right.
It's going to be tomorrow, which is fine. I'm just very interested to see what the Bengals do when they start picking players. You know what I mean? Like,
how much input is Al Golden?
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm fascinated by that piece of it, right? And then you also have obviously, the coaching staff out in LA with the Chargers, and there's some Notre Dame flavor over there. And so, do you see the Chargers kind of stepping up and taking? Can you imagine Benjamin Morrison on one side, Cam Hart on the other side? Like, chalk me up as a Chargers fan.
I think Odie Gilman's still out there, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
So chalk me up, baby. Like, put on the powder blue. Let's go. But no, I think it's going to be fascinating to see where these guys all end up.
I think so too. Like you said, unfortunately, not going to be tonight.
No, and maybe, but doubtful.
So my next question.
Yeah, this is an interesting.
Which of these two guys gets drafted first? Jack Kiser, Riley Leonard.
I think it's got to be Kiser. I think Kiser will probably. I think Kiser will be an early day 3 guy. And I think Leonard will make again. I think Leonard's going to make a team very happy, but I just think he's going to fall beyond that.
I do too.
At the end of the day,
Mel Kiper Jr. has Kiser as his number 138 overall player. He ranked his top 150.
Okay.
He doesn't have Leonard in his top 150. He's got Leonard as his number 9 quarterback. He's got Kiser as his number 9 linebacker. Basically, the first 4 rounds are 128 players. So like you would expect, but again, here's what surprises me, Vince. Jaylen Milroe is getting so much love in these last couple of weeks. People are talking about him possibly going in the first round of the draft. Like, if you look at Jaylen Milroe and Riley Leonard, they're not that different. The playing style, everybody apparently loves Jaylen Milroe's running ability. Well, have you watched Riley Leonard's game? Leonard's got a better completion percentage, than Jaylen Milroe. He's got fewer interceptions in more games than what Milroe played last year, because you might have heard Alabama didn't, make it to the playoff, but Notre Dame got to the national championship game. And Leonard also has a better yards per carry than Jaylen Milroe. So I don't understand the disparity, because we all watched Jaylen Milroe the year before, and I know he got better last year than he was the year before when they made it into the playoff, but I don't see that big a gap between Milroe and Leonard. So I don't understand why Milroe is rated as highly as he is and why Leonard, I get to an extent, because we watch Leonard and we know, that there are, some things as a pro quarterback that he needs to be better at, the ability to work the ball downfield better and work it outside, better in some instances. But I just don't see Milroe being that much better than Leonard.
I see Riley Leonard being in the NFL longer than Jaylen Milroe. That's what I'll say. Okay.
So somebody's going to get a huge bust if they even take Milroe in the second round.
I mean,
what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm hearing some weird stuff, and I'm reading on Twitter and things like that. Like, if he would have come back to Alabama, like the locker room really wouldn't have been all that enthusiastic about it, that kind of stuff. You've never heard anybody say anything like that about Riley Leonard. And if you're going to be a backup quarterback in this league, look, I'm not saying Riley Leonard's going to get drafted and be an all-time starter or anything like that. But if you're going to be a backup quarterback in this league, which I think he could be, you need to be a guy that, number one, is smart, check. You need a guy that's going to be a good teammate, and help out the starter, check. Like, he checks all of those boxes, you know what I mean? And if you need him to come in, you could make him a short yardage guy, number one. Number two, if you need him to come in for a spot start, something like that, you might have to adjust your offense a little bit, but he'll get you through. You know what I mean? So I just feel like he checks a lot of those backup quarterback boxes that I'm not sure Jaylen Milroe does.
Yeah.
That's all.
You put him in the right place, he's got a chance
Yeah.
to continue to grow and make a lot of improvements and grow into something bigger within maybe 3 or 4 years. Over under 6.5 Notre Dame players who are going to be drafted.
This is so hard because basically the number is 6 or 7, and I know that's why you said it where you did. It's so hard because you just don't know, and I always feel like with Notre Dame guys, some guys get overdrafted, some guys get underdrafted, or they're not drafted at all. I'll say under. I'm gonna be the pessimist of the show. I'll say under because I think it'll be 6.
So Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, Riley Leonard, Jack Kiser, Mitchell Evans gets you to 5.
Yeah.
A lot of people are figuring Riley Mills is going to get drafted, and Andrew was asking about him being rated so low. He's actually, like in terms of, player rating, Mel Kiper Jr. has Riley Mills as his 117th best player. The problem with Mills is the injury. He tore his ACL,
right?
And the odds are he's not going to be able to play at all.
It's going to drop him
as a rookie. Yeah. So to me, that's more of you take a flyer maybe in the 6th or 7th round. I think he'll end up getting drafted. So that gets you to 6 right there. So the question is Bo Collins, Howard Cross, RJ Oben, who, by the way, PFF has getting drafted. PFF has 7 guys, including Oben, getting drafted. Okay. ESPN is projecting 5 as of right now. And then you've got Jordan Clark as well. I think as an NFL, you've got 2 NFL legacies, 3 NFL legacies with Cross, Oben, and Clark. I feel like Clark has got the best chance.
That's a pretty great point on your part. Yeah, that's a pretty great point. The legacy thing is legit. You know what I mean? I could see that being a turning point on getting somebody drafted late in the draft.
You're like maybe the Giants in the 6th or 7th round. Again, take a flyer on one of those guys because Cross and Oben's dads both played together.
Right.
With the Giants.
Biggest question, does Mitch Jeter get drafted?
Ooh, I'm going to say no.
Nah, probably not.
Hard for kickers, man.
Yeah, it is hard for kickers.
All these guys, I think, are going to get signed by somebody if they don't get drafted.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. How much of the draft do you think you're going to watch tonight?
I'll watch the whole thing. I like the first round. I will watch a lot of it tomorrow, depending on what's going on in my life. But if I'm home, I'll watch it. The weekend one, that's where it starts to drag for me because that's when, you get the analysts just kind of talking and the draft is happening in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So
they just yak.
The first 2 nights I'm in, the second day, I'll be watching on my phone for updates. That's where I'll be.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of I don't have to wait until the 20s this year for the Cowboys to pick because they were obviously not as good last year. So fortunately, I only have to wait till 12 unless they trade down, which I think is an option as well. I think they could trade up or down. I think it's more likely they trade down than up. I think I'm going to be locked in at least until this feels like the Shadur Sanders watch for good or bad.
Yeah.
What this feels like.
What are your thoughts on Shadur Sanders? Have you watched a lot of his games?
I haven't watched a lot. I mean, I've seen mostly highlights. Sure. I feel like a lot of other guys. I feel like he's a good quarterback, did not have a great offensive line other than Travis Hunter. Mm-hmm. There was not that much, else around him. I think he's got a good arm, not a great arm. Mm-hmm. But I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21 are kind of what people are talking about as a potential landing spot. And I think that it, kind of like I've heard a lot of people say, if you're Mike Tomlin and you feel good, whether it's Jaylen Milroe or Shadur Sanders or Jackson Dart, if you feel good about any of those 3, I could see any of them ending up in Pittsburgh because they desperately need a quarterback, but they also don't want to just take a quarterback to take a quarterback. Gotcha. I'm fairly torn on what I think Shadur Sanders is going to be because it feels like he has just been so picked apart.
He has been. There's obviously benefits to who he is as far as like who his dad is and what his last name is, and there's also negatives, right? I don't think he goes to Jackson State if he didn't want to play for his dad. I think he goes someplace else.
Yeah, absolutely.
If he has a different last name, right? Do I think, I just don't see him as a first round quarterback personally. But quarterbacks are so overvalued, so I don't even know what kind
of that's the thing. Like who really realistically is
right?
A first round quarterback.
It's tough for me. I don't know. I just don't see him as a sustainable starting quarterback in the NFL. And I don't think he'd be happy being a backup. So I just don't know what his career is going to look like. I'll just say that.
But again, like with what he's going to have at Pittsburgh, it's like you got a head coach that knows how to win.
Sure.
I think they'd build the offense around you. You got a couple great wide receivers to throw the football to. You got a good running back. So like,
if he's average though, he's not going to last long.
Yeah, I know.
Pittsburgh. That's the thing.
I'm not convinced any of these guys are first round.
That's fair. I think that's a fair assessment
because the quarterbacks, at least a couple of them, are going to go in the first round.
That's a fair set. Now, here's the other piece. Regardless of his talent level, drafting him means you're drafting the Sanders family. Like, are you welcoming that circus to town?
That's DK saying you really see Tomlin dealing with that. I mean, I think that there's a level of respect that Deion Sanders probably has for a guy like Mike Tomlin that he's not going to have a level, the same level of respect for a lot of other coaches. And vice versa, like because it's Deion Sanders. Like I don't see Deion, trying to pull the puppet strings in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Specifically.
Well, and it's going to be interesting because especially if he goes to Pittsburgh, I mean, you're talking Colorado way over here. You're talking Pittsburgh way over here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, multiple time zones. I mean, in theory, Deion Sanders is still trying to, run a football program at Colorado. And so, what does that mean for, the dad side of things? I don't know.
I like how DK is
he's just poking the bear, baby.
Is trying to tell me that it's a circus in Pittsburgh, but it's perfect for Dallas just because Dallas already is a circus, I guess. I guess. But yeah.
Well, you draft him, then you get Deion as the head coach soon. So there you go.
Yeah. So Vince, ABC's Wide World of Sports made its debut on this date in 1961. Are you old enough to have any memory of ABC's Wide World of Sports?
No. Is the answer. I know of it. I know that it existed, but I never saw it as like a live situation. No.
The old Jim McKay spanning the globe.
Yeah, that's
to bring you the constant variety of sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And
I've heard all of those things.
The music's bum, 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 and the music's playing, and they show the guy wipe out on the skis and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you've ever seen.
I have
that
seen
one,
that,
but
yeah.
it was obviously. Predated ESPN by almost 2 decades. ESPN was
ESPN was 78, 79.
Yeah. And they,
because ESPN's almost the same age as me. That's why how I know that. It's a little bit older.
That's, and it's ultimately ESPN is what did in Wide World of Sports because you had a 24-hour, multiple 24-hour sports stations that were showing a lot of the same things, like ESPN was showing Australian rules football and all these different things, like when they were getting off the ground. But Wide World of Sports, it would come on for a couple hours on Saturday, and they would just you never knew where they were going to be from one week to the next. Like they'd be at a sailing event one week, and they'd be at in Mexico at one of those cliff diving competitions the next week, and then they're in China, badminton competitions and just all kinds of crazy stuff. So it was the original Ocho is what Andrew said.
I think that's actually pretty funny.
Yep. But yeah, I saw that this morning. It's wow, 1961 on this date. But that used to be, again, back when there were 3 channels and nothing else on, it was ABC's Wide World of Sports, man. Back in the day.
That's 65 years old, 64 years old, right?
Something like that. 64. Man. Making me feel another day older. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for tonight. Jesse will be here tomorrow, and it's going to be interesting as we call him out. Time to pay the piper.
That's got to be the number one topic
For
tomorrow.
his ill-informed wager with Vince and I.
We tried, and I want to go on record because we tried to prevent him from making this bet on the air. You can go back and you can listen. We tried to save him from himself, but it
kept doubling down. He kept doubling down.
It did not work.
Normal time, Joe. 5 o'clock is the plan for tomorrow. Thanks for asking. Since I know we have changed the time a few times in the last couple.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, we should be good.
All right, great questions in the mailbag tonight. Vince enjoyed it as always. Everybody else, we will talk to you tomorrow. Hit that like button before you check out, and we'll talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.
See you, everybody.